So as we left our last session, James had outlined 4 things that he wanted the Gentiles to be informed of. And we pick it up now with the letter that this group actually writes to the church in Syrian Antioch in Acts chapter 15, verse 22. And the leaders of all of this gathering, all of the main church leaders that were part of the church in Jerusalem, decided that the best thing to do would be to write a letter and send that letter with personal representatives from Jerusalem. And they chose a man named Judas, also called Barsabbas, and Silas, also called Silvanus. And Silas in particular shows up later as a co-worker of Paul. But for right now, these are 2 key leaders in the church of Jerusalem that have established themselves as godly, mature, faithful people. They have risked their lives for the gospel, and that is a known thing. So these men are going to go back with Paul and Barnabas to deliver the letter in person so that they can help avoid all the confusion that started when the first group went up there. And they begin their letter by saying, "Some men came to you from Jerusalem with no authorization." They wanted to make it clear to the church that these well-intentioned but mistaken Judaizers, the ones who originally came and said the Gentiles had to be circumcised, they were not representing the leaders of the Christian church. They said that on their own authority, not on the authority of the church and the church leaders. And we'll notice, if you look at that letter, the letter is not only addressed to the church in Syrian Antioch, where the issue started. The letter is addressed to really the whole church, which allows Paul and Barnabas and Silas and Judas to walk back up, visiting all those churches again, and share the letter. And the letter starts by kind of explaining what the problem. "We've heard that some men came and they disturbed you. These men did not come from us." So they established the problem first. And then here's their response. "We chose some men who are above reproach and sent them with this message." Then it talks about the solution. It says, "You should not be burdened with unreasonable laws." In other words, this is not about following laws. Salvation is by grace. Now, our behavior should reflect our salvation, but it's not about following laws. "You shouldn't be burdened with unreasonable laws," it says, "so we ask this of you." And then it goes on and says, "Please abstain from these 4 things." Then at the very end of the letter, it says, "You will do well to abstain from these things." Now think about the phrase of that. It does not say, "We are instructing you to abstain." It does not say, "We have reviewed the Old Testament and we keep these 4 laws because we like laws." There is no burden placed on the Gentiles of a law. There is no demand placed on them from the disciples, the apostles. It is just, we encourage you for the sake of unity to be careful about these 4 things, because unity in the church is what's important. Don't do things that will destroy that unity. And part of the rationale is part of the fullness of time we've talked about in previous classes, because the Jewish church is known all over the empire. Most of the Gentiles, including these new Christian Gentiles, know something about the Jews. The Jews are prominent in the Roman Empire. And so they knew already that the Jews had some strange, to them, eating habits. So because everyone already knows that the Jews have some strange habits, or at least that's what they probably thought at the time, because they know the Jews have dietary prohibitions, laws, this won't be strange to ask you to abstain from something that you probably knew already was kind of a problem. So Gentiles, the Jews struggle with these things, so you would do well, for the sake of unity, to abstain from these things. The guidelines not laws, the guidelines are designed to promote and to maintain unity in the body of Christ between these new Jewish believers and the new Gentile believers. And again, one of the key elements to this is communion. Remember that the Jews up to this point had been told not to eat at all with the Gentiles. They shouldn't go into the home and have a meal with the Gentile, let alone eat these special foods that have been prohibited to them. Now, they're trying to figure out, how do they share communion? How do they share a meal together when in hundreds and hundreds of years of their religious history, they've been told that was wrong? So the Jews are struggling. The Gentiles are struggling because they now have a new set of life guidelines, sexual purity, for example, that were not part of the way they grew up. So everyone is struggling, and this letter is an incredibly gracious way to start the process, to start identifying some biblical doctrine for a unified church in the New Testament times. This does not mean that God has forgotten the Jews. It does not mean Paul is trying to distract from the Jews. In fact, he tells the Gentiles in Romans that the Gentiles are like a branch grafted onto a tree. Now, I'm not a gardener, but for those of you who are gardeners, you know that there is a way to take a small branch from one tree and implant it into the trunk of another tree and have it gain life and grow. And Paul uses that example to say the Gentiles are kind of like that. The Jews are still the trunk of this tree. It is from the Jews that the Messiah has come. And it is the same Messiah for all of us. So now we need to be unified. Well, they took that letter and they shared it with churches all the way back. Everyone rejoiced. It says that towards the middle, verse 35 of chapter 15, they brought the message, Silas, Barsabbas, Paul, Barnabas, they brought it, finally got to their home church of Syrian Antioch, and the message was very encouraging to the Gentile church. That was a well-done letter. Imagine getting a letter that tells you you should abstain from doing things that are normal to you, and you are encouraged by that letter. I think that shows the maturity and the wisdom of the disciples who wrote the letter. It also shows a growing maturity from the Gentiles. They were encouraged, probably not because there were some new ideas they needed to do. They were encouraged because the whole point was unity. That doesn't say that in the text, but that's my impression from reading it here. And then it says, they stayed a while and returned to Jerusalem. Paul and Barnabas, the pastors of the church in Syrian Antioch, continued to stay and minister to the church in Syrian Antioch. And we'll find in our next class that their next step was to go on another missionary journey, which had all kinds of problems of its own.